It's painful to realize who your family really is when you turn to them for help and they're busy calculating how inconvenient you are. Barely able to stand from the pain, I heard my daughter's voice. "We're not your caretakers, Dad." Her husband stood behind her, arms crossed and nodding, as if I'd asked them to haul me up Mount Everest instead of help me to the bathroom. They thought they were walking away from responsibility, but they had no idea they were about to learn what a disappointed father is capable of. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. The pain medication made everything feel like I was swimming through honey, but their voices cut through clear voices, clear as ice water. I'd been home from the hospital for exactly 18 hours, still wearing the same clothes I'd put on for discharge because bending to change felt impossible. "Abby, I just need help getting to the shower," I said, gripping the arm of my recliner. The same chair where I'd held her as a baby, read her bedtime stories, helped her with homework. How did we get here? The thought drifted through my mind like smoke. She stood in my living room, the living room I'd worked double shifts to pay for, with her arms crossed, that expression on her face. The one that meant I was being unreasonable for having needs. "This is my house," I reminded myself, watching her exchange glances with Andrew, my house that I've shared with them for 3 years. "Dad, you're being dramatic," she said, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "It's just a shower. You can figure it out." Andrew nodded behind her like a bobblehead. "We've got plans today. Important plans." Important plans. I almost laughed, but it would have hurt too much. Their important plans usually involved spending money they hadn't earned while I covered their rent, their groceries, their car insurance. I tried to stand straighter, ignoring the fire across my abdomen. "I'm not asking you to move mountains. I'm asking for 10 minutes of help from my own family." The silence stretched between us like a canyon. I could hear the kitchen clock ticking. The same clock that had marked time through Abby's childhood tantrums, her teenage rebellion, her college failures I'd paid to fix. 3 years. My mind wandered to that first conversation when they'd moved in. "Just until we get back on our feet, Dad. You're saving our lives." 36 months of my retirement fund draining away, of coming home to find them lounging while I worked overtime to keep us all afloat. "Look, Dad." Abby's voice snapped me back to the present. "We're not running a nursing home here. You knew this surgery was coming. You should have made arrangements." My chest tightened. Arrangements. As if asking my own daughter, who'd lived rent-free in my home for 3 years, to help me shower was some unreasonable imposition. What arrangements? The words came out sharper than I intended. "I raised you, Abby. I've housed you, fed you, paid your bills for 3 years. I'm asking for 1 week of basic human decency." Andrew finally spoke up, his voice carrying that condescending tone that made my teeth ache. "That's emotional manipulation, and we're not falling for it." Emotional manipulation. I stared at him. This man who'd eaten my food, slept under my roof, used my Wi-Fi to apply for jobs he never seemed to get, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. Something I'd been pushing down for months was finally surfacing, cold and calculating. "You're right," I said quietly, sinking back into my chair. "You're absolutely right." They looked surprised, maybe even relieved. They thought I was conceding. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what I was actually agreeing to. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Sometimes a man needs to lay all his cards on the table just to see if anyone's been paying attention. "You know what? Let's talk about emotional manipulation," I said, my voice steady despite the pain shooting through my side. "Let's talk about the real manipulation that's been happening in this house." Abby rolled her eyes. "Here we go. Here we go." As if my reality was just another inconvenient performance. I could feel my heartbeat in my temples, but my mind was crystallizing, becoming sharp and focused in a way it hadn't been in months. "The car insurance I've paid for 3 years while Andrew couldn't find work, $480 a month. That's not manipulation. That's just Dad being Dad, right?" My voice was getting stronger, clearer. "The groceries, the utilities, the credit card bills I covered when you two decided to take that vacation to Miami last Christmas? $2,300 for a weekend getaway." Andrew shifted uncomfortably. "That was different. That was what?" I cut him off, and something in my tone made them both freeze. That was family helping family. That was love, because I thought that's what I was asking for today. The Miami trip, my mind drifted back to that December morning when I'd found the credit card statement. $2,347, 82 for hotels, flights, and dinners while I ate canned soup to make ends meet. When I'd asked about it, Abby had cried, said they needed time to reconnect, to strengthen their marriage, said I should be happy they were working on their relationship. Dad, we appreciate everything you've done, but, Abby started, using that patronizing voice she'd perfected over the years. But nothing. The words came out like a gunshot. Don't you dare stand there and talk to me about appreciation while telling me you can't spare 10 minutes to help me shower after surgery. The room went dead silent. Even the clock seemed to stop ticking. I pulled myself up from the chair, ignoring the agony it caused. You want to know what emotional manipulation looks like? It's living rent-free in someone's house for 3 years while making them feel guilty for asking for basic human decency. It's taking $1,700 a month in rent, plus utilities, plus food, plus insurance, then calling them manipulative when they finally need something back. $1,700 a month. I calculated in my head the numbers I'd been trying not to think about. $61,200 over 3 years. Plus the emergency loans that became gifts. Plus the credit cards I paid off. Plus. Andrew's face was flushing red. We never asked to live here. Never asked. The lie hit me like a physical blow. I could still remember that night 3 years ago. Abby sobbing at my kitchen table, Andrew standing behind her with his head hanging in shame. They'd been evicted, had nowhere to go, no family who would take them in except good old Dad. Really? I said, my voice dropping to barely a whisper. Because I remember it differently. I remember you both crying in this very room, begging me to let you stay just until you got back on your feet. I remember promising to take care of you, the way I always have. The silence stretched between us like a battlefield. I could see something shifting in their expressions, a flicker of shame, maybe, or fear. They were starting to realize this conversation wasn't going the way they'd planned. Well, congratulations, I said, settling back into my chair with deliberate slowness. You've officially gotten back on your feet, and now you can use them to walk out of my house. The words hung in the air like smoke from a gun. Abby's mouth dropped open. Andrew looked like I'd slapped him. Dad, you don't mean that, Abby whispered. But I did. For the first time in 3 years, I meant exactly what I said. The silence after they left had weight to it. Not the comfortable quiet of an empty house, something heavier, more loaded, like the moment right before a storm breaks. I was still sitting in that damn chair, still wearing the same clothes from yesterday, still needing that shower that had started this whole mess. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, planning some grand strategy, and I couldn't even wash my own hair. Maybe that's the real problem, I thought, shifting carefully to ease the pressure on my incision. Maybe I've been so busy being indispensable that I forgot how to be independent. My phone buzzed again. Abby, Dad, we didn't mean what we said. Can we talk tomorrow when everyone's calmer? I stared at the message, then at my reflection in the black screen when it dimmed. Wild gray hair, 3 days of stubble, surgical tape peeking out from under my wrinkled shirt. I looked like exactly what I was, a man who'd been waiting for someone else to take care of him. When's the last time you did anything for yourself? The thought hit me like cold water. When's the last time I'd gone anywhere alone? Made a decision without considering how it would affect Abby and Andrew? Hell, when's the last time I'd eaten dinner without leaving money on the counter for groceries I'd never see? I pulled myself up from the chair, ignoring the sharp protest from my abdomen. If I was going to figure this out, I needed to start with the basics. I needed that shower. The bathroom mirror showed me a stranger. Not the capable father who'd raised Abby through everything. Not the problem solver who'd bailed them out of every crisis. Just a 61-year-old man who'd somehow forgotten how to take care of himself. You managed fine before them, I reminded myself, running water and testing the temperature. You bought this house, built a career, raised a daughter. You can figure out how to wash your own back. The shower was awkward, painful, and took 20 minutes longer than it should have. But I did it, without help, without someone standing outside the door making me feel guilty for needing time. This is what independence feels like, I realized, toweling off carefully around the bandages. Uncomfortable, slow, but mine. That's when it hit me. The real revelation wasn't about them, it was about me. I'd spent 3 years training them to be dependent on me, but I'd also trained myself to be dependent on being needed. Every crisis I solved, every bill I paid, every emergency I handled, it wasn't just enabling them, it was feeding something in me that needed to feel essential. What if the problem isn't that they won't leave? I thought, pulling on fresh clothes for the first time in days. What if the problem is that I don't know who I am when I'm not solving their problems? My phone rang, Abby's name on the screen. I looked at it for a long moment, feeling something shift inside me like tectonic plates, finding a new alignment. For 3 years, I would have answered by the second ring, would have listened to her explanations, her apologies, her new crisis that required my immediate attention. Instead, I let it ring. And in that silence, in that simple act of not answering, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Choice. Pure, uncomfortable, terrifying choice. They don't need me, I realized with crystal clarity. They need my money, my house, my willingness to solve their problems, but they don't actually need me. The phone stopped ringing, started again immediately. This time, I turned it off completely. If they want to fix this, I thought, looking around my clean, quiet house with new eyes, they can start by learning to function without me for one single day. It was a small revolution, but revolutions I was learning sometimes start with something as simple as taking a shower by yourself. By the next morning, I'd received 14 missed calls and 23 text messages. I knew because I'd turned my phone back on just long enough to see the numbers before switching it off again. 14 calls in 12 hours, I thought, gripping the kitchen counter as a wave of post-surgical pain rolled through my abdomen. The shower had taken more out of me than I'd admitted to myself. Every movement still felt like pulling stitches, but at least I was clean. The irony was delicious. When I was available, predictable, always there to solve their problems, I was invisible. The moment I became unreachable, I became the center of their universe. I was carefully lowering myself into a chair. Christ, everything still hurts, when I heard the key in the front door. Their key, I realized. The key I'd given them for emergencies that had somehow become their permanent pass to my life. Dad? Abby's voice carried that particular note of forced concern that she used when she needed something important. Dad, are you okay? You're not answering your phone. I continued sipping my coffee, each small motion deliberate to avoid aggravating the incision. My hallway, I thought as I listened to their footsteps. When did I stop thinking of this as my house? Dad, we know you're here. Your car's in the driveway. Andrew's voice now, with that edge of irritation barely concealed behind fake worry. They appeared in the kitchen doorway, and I watched their faces change as they took in the scene. Me, showered and dressed despite obvious discomfort, sitting at my own table with coffee I'd made myself. Jesus, Dad, you look terrible, Abby said, rushing forward. You shouldn't be up and around like this. Now, you care about my recovery, I thought, noting how her concern felt different today. Performative, like she was auditioning for the role of caring daughter. I'm fine, I said flatly. Andrew stepped forward, his expression shifting to what I recognized as his problem-solving face. Look, about yesterday, we were out of line. We talked about it, and we want to make things right. Make things right. The phrase sat between us like a loaded gun. Yesterday, those words would have meant everything to me. Today, they just sounded like negotiation tactics. We've been thinking, Abby continued, settling into the chair across from me without invitation. Maybe we were too hasty. You're right. Family should take care of family. I studied her face, noting the subtle changes, the way her eyes kept darting around the room, the nervous energy that had nothing to do with concern for my health. Interesting timing for that realization, I said. What do you mean? But her voice pitched higher, the way it always did when she was lying. I stood up slowly, ignoring the sharp protest from my surgical site, and walked to where I always sorted my mail on the kitchen counter. Yesterday, when I got home from the hospital, there was a letter here, from my investment firm. I was too weak to deal with it then, figured I'd handle it today. My eyes scanned the empty counter. Funny thing is, I can't seem to find it now. The silence that followed had weight to it. I could practically hear their hearts pounding. Dad, we haven't seen any mail, Abby said, but she wouldn't meet my eyes. Liar. The word burned in my chest, but I kept my voice level. Really? Because I remember it clearly. White envelope, return address from Peterson Financial Group. I said it right here next to the salt shaker. Andrew cleared his throat. Maybe it fell or got mixed up with something else. I turned to face them fully, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. 3 years of being their safety net, and I'd never truly seen them before. Not like this. Not with the calculating expressions they wore when they thought I wasn't looking. You know what I think happened to that letter? I said quietly. They waited, frozen like deer in headlights. I think someone got curious about whether their free ride was about to get more expensive or more profitable. Abby's face crumpled into practiced tears. Dad, how can you say that? We came here because we were worried about you, and you're accusing us of... Of what, Abby? I cut her off, my voice harder than it had ever been with her. What exactly am I accusing you of? The tears stopped as quickly as they'd started. That was the tell. The moment I realized that everything, their sudden concern, their change of heart, their willingness to help, was connected to whatever was in that missing letter. Where is my mail? I asked, each word precise and cold. Andrew's hand moved unconsciously toward his jacket pocket. The gesture was so quick, so instinctive, that he probably didn't even realize he'd done it. But I saw it, and in that moment, I understood exactly what kind of people I'd been supporting for 3 years. Empty your pockets, I said. Dad, this is ridiculous, Abby started. Ridiculous. The word hit me like a slap. After everything I'd done for her, asking for honesty was ridiculous. I could feel heat rising in my chest, mixing with the dull ache from my incision. Empty. Your pockets. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Andrew's face had gone ashen, like his hand still hovering near his jacket. I could see a vein pulsing in his temple, the way it did when he was cornered about his unemployment benefits or his gambling debts. Look at him sweat, I thought with cold satisfaction. 3 years of treating me like an ATM, and now he's scared. I said empty them, I repeated, my voice dropping to a whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. With shaking hands, Andrew reached into his jacket and pulled out a crumpled white envelope. My name and address were clearly visible, along with the Peterson Financial Group logo. The envelope had been torn open hastily, not the careful slit I would have made. My mail, in his pocket, like evidence he was planning to dispose of. The betrayal felt physical, like something sharp turning in my stomach alongside the surgical pain. I held out my hand without a word. He placed it in my palm like he was handing over evidence at a crime scene. Inside was exactly what I'd expected. Notification that my mother's estate had been settled. $68,000 to be transferred to my account within 5 business days. Money I'd never mentioned to them. Money that was supposed to be my private grief, my private relief. How long have you been reading my mail? I asked, still staring at the letter. Dad, it's not what you think. Abby's voice was small now, all the false bravado gone. Not what I think. Then explain why my personal correspondence was in your husband's pocket. I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs, each beat sending a spike of pain through my surgical site. How long? Andrew cleared his throat. Look, sometimes if we're here and mail comes, we might glance. Glance. Like accidentally reading someone else's diary, like stumbling across private information by mistake. 3 years? I interrupted. The whole time you've been living here, you've been going through my private correspondence? The shame on their faces told me everything I needed to know. Jesus Christ, I thought, sinking back into my chair as the full scope of it hit me. The surgical pain was nothing compared to this. They've been treating me like a mark for 3 years, reading my bank statements, my medical records, my personal letters, every doctor's appointment I'd mentioned, every financial worry I'd shared, every private moment I'd thought was just between us. They'd been collecting intelligence like spies in enemy territory. What else have you seen? I asked quietly. They exchanged another look, and I caught something in Abby's expression that made my blood freeze. There's more. Of course there's more. What else? I demanded. Dad, please, just listen, Abby began. Listen to more lies, to more manipulation. My hands were trembling now, whether from rage or surgical trauma. I couldn't tell. The life insurance documents, Andrew blurted out, apparently deciding honesty was his best option now. We saw the updates you made after your surgery consultation. My life insurance. The policy I'd updated when I learned about the surgery, just being responsible. Making sure everything was in order in case something went wrong. The policy that named Abby as the primary beneficiary. They know exactly how much I'm worth dead. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the table, not just from surgical pain now, but from a nauseating understanding of what I was really looking at. $500,000. That's what I'm worth to them dead. More than I've ever been worth alive. So yesterday, I said, my voice remarkably steady considering the tremor in my hands, when you refused to help me shower, when you called me manipulative, when you said you weren't my caretakers, you already knew about the inheritance. You already knew about the life insurance. Dad, it's not. Abby tried again. It's not what? It's not calculated. It's not cold. It's not the kind of thing that makes a father wonder if his daughter sees him as more valuable dead than alive. You already knew I was worth more to you than I've ever been before, I continued. Dead or alive, I'm the most valuable I've ever been, and you still couldn't spare 10 minutes to help me wash my hair. The kitchen fell dead silent except for the sound of my own breathing, which seemed unnaturally loud. This is my daughter, I thought, staring at Abby's tear-streaked face. The little girl I taught to ride a bike, who used to fall asleep on my chest during movies. And she's been calculating my net worth behind my back. Get out, I said quietly. Dad, please, let us explain. Explain what? How reading someone's private mail for 3 years is actually an act of love? How knowing the value of my life insurance policy is just good financial planning? Get out! The words exploded from me with such force that both of them actually stepped backward. Pain shot through my abdomen from the exertion, but I didn't care. Get out of my house. Get out of my life. Get out before I call the police and tell them about the mail fraud. Abby was crying now, real tears this time. Daddy, please. We love you. Daddy. Now I'm Daddy again. Now that the money's real, now that they need me to forgive them, I'm Daddy instead of just Dad. Love? I laughed, and the sound was ugly even to my own ears. You love my bank account. You love my life insurance policy. You love my inheritance checks. But me, the man who raised you, who sacrificed everything for you, who would have given you anything if you just asked, would have given them anything. Past tense, because that man is gone. I stood up slowly, ignoring the fire in my side. You can't even love me enough to help me shower after surgery. I walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept the spare keys and pulled them out. These are mine, I said, holding them up. My house, my rules, my privacy. You want back in? You can knock on the door like strangers, because that's what you are now. Andrew finally found his voice. Where are we supposed to go? Where are we supposed to go? Not we're sorry. Not we'll make this right. Just where will we land when our free ride ends? I looked at him, this man who'd lived off my generosity for 3 years while reading my private mail behind my back, and felt nothing. Not anger anymore. Not disappointment. Nothing. I honestly don't care, I said, but you have until tonight to get your things. After that, anything left here goes in the trash. Dad, you can't just what? Can't just stop being your personal ATM? Can't just expect privacy in my own home? Can't just ask for basic human decency without being called manipulative? Watch me. They left without another word, and I spent the rest of the morning in my chair trying to process what had just happened. The silence in the house felt different now. Not empty, but expectant, like the quiet before a thunderstorm. 3 years, I kept thinking, touching the inheritance letter that now sat on the table like evidence. 3 years of reading my mail, monitoring my finances, calculating my worth. The pain medication was wearing off, leaving me with both physical discomfort and a crystal clear mind. Maybe that was good. Maybe I needed to feel this, all of it. Around noon, my phone started ringing again. I looked at the caller ID and felt my stomach drop. Tom. Of course, she called Tom. Of course, she got to him first with her version of events. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Hello, Tom. David? What the hell is going on? Abby just called me sobbing, saying you threw them out of the house. She said you're having some kind of breakdown after the surgery. Breakdown. Of course, that's how she'd frame it. I could feel that familiar tightness in my chest, the same feeling I'd gotten for years whenever someone questioned my judgment about Abby. Did she now? I said carefully. She said you accused them of stealing your mail and threatened to have them arrested. Dave, come on. This is Abby we're talking about. Your daughter. My daughter. The words hit me like a physical blow. Tom's voice carried that tone, the one that said, I was being unreasonable, that I was the problem, that family was supposed to forgive anything. Tom, I said slowly, what exactly did she tell you? She said you've been acting paranoid since the surgery, that you're imagining things, that you threw them out over some misunderstanding about mail. His voice softened. Dave, I know recovery from surgery can mess with your head. The painkillers, the stress. He thinks I'm having drug-induced paranoia. I could feel anger rising in my throat like bile. She told you I was imagining it? Look, I'm not taking sides here, but Dave, these are good kids. They've been taking care of you for 3 years. Maybe you misunderstood something? Good kids. Taking care of me. The same narrative I'd been telling myself, that everyone had been telling me. The same lie that had cost me my retirement savings. Tom, I need you to listen to me very carefully, I said. I found my inheritance letter from Mom's estate in Andrew's jacket pocket. Opened. Read. Hidden from me. Silence on the other end. That's impossible, Tom said finally. Why would they? $68,000, Tom. That's what Mom left me. They knew about it before I did because they've been reading my mail. Dave, that doesn't make sense. Why would Abby read your mail? Why indeed? I could feel that cold clarity settling over me again, the same feeling I'd had when I'd realized what I was looking at. To keep track of my finances, to know when money was coming in, to monitor my medical records, my insurance policies, my bank statements. My voice was getting steadier with each word. Tom, they know exactly how much my life insurance policy is worth. Another silence, longer this time. How much? Tom asked, and something in his voice had changed. $500,000. They've known for months. Jesus Christ, Dave. Finally someone is hearing me. It gets worse, I said, and I told him about yesterday. About being 18 hours out from surgery, barely able to stand, asking for 10 minutes of help with a shower. They refused? Tom's voice was incredulous now. You couldn't shower after surgery and they refused to help? They told me I was being manipulative, said they weren't my caretakers, called me a burden. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. Tom, they knew I was worth $500,000 dead, and they couldn't spare 10 minutes to help me wash my hair. The silence that followed was deafening. I could hear Tom breathing on the other end, could almost hear him processing what I was telling him. This is the moment, I thought. This is where I find out if my own brother believes me or thinks I'm losing my mind. Dave, Tom said finally, his voice quiet. Are you telling me they've been reading your private mail for 3 years? Every piece. Bank statements, medical records, investment letters, insurance documents, everything. And they refused to help you shower after surgery? Said it wasn't their job. Another long pause. Then, scumbags. Relief flooded through me like warm water. Someone believed me. Someone understood. Scumbags, Tom repeated, and now his voice was angry. Dave, that's not just cruel. That's criminal. Opening someone else's mail is a federal crime. I know, and they've been living in your house rent-free for 3 years, eating my food, using my utilities, driving cars I pay insurance on, while reading your private correspondence behind your back, while calculating how much I'm worth to them. Tom was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder. Dave, I owe you an apology. When Abby called, she made it sound like you were having some kind of mental breakdown, said you were being paranoid and irrational. She's good at that, I said. She's been practicing for 3 years. What do you mean? Every time I questioned anything, where the grocery money went, why Andrew couldn't find work, why my retirement fund was disappearing, she'd make it about my mental state. I was being paranoid. I was being controlling. I was imagining things. Jesus, Dave, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you instead of assuming. Instead of assuming the sweet little girl who used to sit on your lap at Christmas couldn't possibly be manipulating her father? Yeah, Tom said quietly. Instead of that. We sat in silence for a moment. I could feel something shifting between us, some barrier that had been there for years, finally crumbling. What are you going to do? Tom finally asked. I looked around my kitchen, my clean, quiet kitchen where no one was monitoring my mail or calculating my net worth. First, I'm calling a locksmith, I said. Then I'm calling the bank to remove them from any accounts they might have access to. Then I'm calling my lawyer to change my will. Change your will? Abby is currently my sole beneficiary, $500,000 in life insurance, plus whatever's left of my estate. After today, she gets nothing. Dave, that's a big step. Tom, she read my private mail for 3 years, refused to help me shower after surgery, and sees me as more valuable dead than alive. I'd say it's an overdue step. Tom was quiet for a moment. You're right. You're absolutely right. I'm also calling my investment advisor about that inheritance money. I want it moved to an account they've never seen or heard of. What else? I thought for a moment, feeling that cold clarity settling over me like armor. I'm going to do something I haven't done in 3 years, I said. I'm going to live my life without asking permission from people who see me as a bank account with legs. Good for you, Tom said, and for the first time in years, I heard genuine respect in my brother's voice. It's about damn time. After I hung up, I didn't waste time. The first call went to a 24-hour locksmith service. I need all the locks changed on my house today, I told them. It's an emergency. The second call went to my bank. I need to review all accounts and remove any authorized users immediately. The third call went to my lawyer. Janet, it's David Harrison. I need to schedule an emergency appointment to change my will, yes today, if possible. The fourth call was to my investment advisor. I have inheritance money coming in next week. I want it moved to a completely separate account. No one should have access but me. By the time I hung up from the fourth call, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Not anger anymore, not hurt, something much more dangerous. Purpose. I was done being their victim. Now it was time to be their consequence. Around 2 o'clock, there was a knock on my door. Not the key in the lock I'd grown accustomed to, but an actual knock. The locksmith had already come and gone, leaving me with new keys and a sense of security I hadn't felt in years. I looked through the peephole and saw Abby and Andrew on my doorstep, along with a woman I didn't recognize carrying a professional-looking bag. Round 2, I thought, feeling that cold satisfaction settle in my chest. Let's see what they try next. I opened the door but didn't invite them in. Dad, this is Patricia, Abby said, her voice carefully controlled, eyes still red from crying. She's a family counselor. We thought maybe if we talked to someone neutral. A family counselor. I almost smiled. Now they want professional help to manipulate me back into compliance. Hello, Mr. Harrison, Patricia said with that practiced smile all therapists seem to have. I understand there's been a misunderstanding between you and your family. A misunderstanding. I could feel that cold clarity settling over me again, the same feeling I'd had when I'd taken that shower by myself yesterday. The feeling of seeing things exactly as they were. There's no misunderstanding, I said quietly. They know exactly what they did. I know exactly what they did. The only question is what happens next. Dad, please. Abby stepped forward and I noticed something different about her. The tears were real this time, but underneath them was something else. Desperation. She's starting to realize this isn't going according to plan. Let us come in. Let's talk this through like adults. Like adults. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the child I'd raised, but the woman who'd been reading my private mail while I paid her bills. Adults don't read other people's mail, I said. Adults don't calculate their father's worth dead versus alive. Adults help their family members shower after surgery. Patricia cleared her throat. Mr. Harrison, I know emotions are running high, but family therapy can help rebuild trust when... Can it help with mail fraud? I asked pleasantly. Because that's what this is. Federal crime, opening someone else's mail without permission. The counselor's face changed. Good. Let her understand what she walked into. Dad, you're not going to press charges against your own daughter, Andrew said. And there was something in his voice that made my spine straighten. Is that a threat? Is he actually threatening me on my own doorstep? Try me, I said softly. That's when I saw it. A flicker of something ugly in Andrew's eyes. Something that made me understand why Abby had married him and why they'd made such a perfect team in bleeding me dry. You know what, old man? Andrew said, stepping closer. You want to play hardball? Let's play hardball. We've been supporting you too, emotionally. Taking care of this house. Abby's been your whole social life for 3 years. Supporting me emotionally. Taking care of my house, my social life. I could feel something dangerous rising in my chest. Supporting me, I said quietly, by reading my mail, taking care of my house, by living in it rent-free, being my social life by isolating me from everyone else so I'd be completely dependent on you. That's it, isn't it? They didn't just want my money. They wanted me to need them, wanted me to have nowhere else to go. Face it, Dad, Abby said, and her mask was finally slipping completely. Without us, what do you have? You don't have friends, you don't have hobbies, you don't have a life. We are your life. There it is, the truth. Not love, not family, control. I smiled then, the same smile I'd worn when I'd told them to empty their pockets. You know what? I said, looking directly at Abby. You're absolutely right. Without you, I don't have much of a life. Relief flooded her face. Patricia looked pleased, like she'd just witnessed a breakthrough. Even Andrew relaxed slightly. But here's the thing, I continued, pulling out my phone and showing them the screen. I spent the afternoon making some changes. I watched their faces as they read the display. Bank of America, account closed. Wells Fargo, authorized users removed. Morrison Law Office will updated. I may not have much of a life, I said, stepping back and putting my hand on the door. But at least now it's mine, and so is my money. The color drained from Abby's face. Dad, what did you do? I did what I should have done 3 years ago, I said. I took back control of my own life. You can't just cut us off like this. Andrew's voice was rising now, the mask finally coming off completely. We have rights. Rights. I laughed, and the sound was sharp as broken glass. Rights? I said. To my house? To my money? To my private correspondence? I shook my head. The only right you have is the right to leave my property before I call the police. Dad, please, Abby was crying again, but these tears were different. These were tears of panic, not manipulation. We have nowhere to go. And there it was. The truth at the bottom of everything. They hadn't just been using me for money, they'd made sure they couldn't survive without me. You should have thought of that, I said quietly, before you decided I was more valuable as an ATM than as a father. And for the second time in 2 days, I closed the door in their faces, but this time, I turned the deadbolt. This time, they didn't have a key. That evening, as I sat in my living room for the first time in years without the sound of other people's conversations drifting through the house, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Quiet. Real. Complete quiet. Not the tense silence of walking on eggshells, I thought, settling into my recliner with a book I'd wanted to read for months. Just peace. My phone had been buzzing all afternoon. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails I wouldn't listen to. The digital equivalent of someone pounding on a door that would never open for them again. Let them panic, I realized with surprising calm. Let them experience what it feels like when their safety net disappears. For 3 years, I'd been their solution to every problem. Lost job? Dad will help. Eviction notice? Dad's got room. Need money? Dad's got savings. Want to know his financial situation? Dad's mail is right there on the counter. I'd trained them to see me as an endless resource instead of a human being. The house felt different now, bigger somehow, like I was seeing rooms I'd forgotten existed. The kitchen where I could eat dinner at any time without considering anyone else's schedule. The bathroom where I could shower without someone sighing about the inconvenience of helping their recovering father. My space, my choices, my life. I thought about calling Tom back, telling him how the day had ended, but decided against it. For the first time in years, I didn't need to process my decisions with anyone. Didn't need permission or validation or advice. I'd made the right choice. I knew it in my bones. The inheritance money would arrive next week. $68,000 that they'd never calculate, never plan around, never see as their ticket to an easier life. The life insurance policy would be changed tomorrow. Tom would inherit it, someone who'd never once calculated my value dead versus alive. They'd gambled everything on my inability to live without them. They'd been wrong. I opened my book and began to read. No one interrupted me. No one needed money for groceries they'd never buy. No one rolled their eyes at my choice of entertainment. This is what independence feels like. I mused. This is what it means to live for yourself instead of through other people. My phone rang, Abby's name on the display. I looked at it for a long moment, then turned the phone face down on the table beside me. Some lessons, I thought, returning to my book, can only be learned the hard way. For 61 years, I'd believed that love meant sacrifice. That being a good father meant being an endless source of solutions, money, and forgiveness. That family was something you endured rather than something that enriched your life. I'd been wrong about all of it. Real love doesn't read your private mail. Real love doesn't calculate your net worth behind your back. Real love shows up when you need help showering after surgery without being asked, without complaining, without making it about their inconvenience. Real love sees you as a human being, not an ATM with legs. The house settled around me with gentle creaking sounds, the kind of peaceful noises that come when a space is truly yours. No footsteps on the stairs that belong to people counting your money. No hushed conversations about your medical appointments and what they might mean for their financial future. Just the sound of a man finally living in his own home. I read until my eyes grew heavy, then marked my place and turned off the lamp. As I headed upstairs to bed, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. I looked different somehow. Not younger exactly, but clearer, like fog had lifted from around me. I'd spent 3 years apologizing for existing in my own house, I realized. Tonight I exist without apology. Before sleep, one final thought occurred to me as I pulled the covers up in my own bed, in my own room, surrounded by the deep quiet that comes from genuine solitude. They'd taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, even if they hadn't meant to. They'd taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for others and for yourself is to stop enabling their worst impulses. They'd taught me that I was worth more than what I could provide, and tomorrow I'd start learning who I was when I wasn't busy being someone else's solution.